The 2021 NFL draft class is 3 years into their careers, and this class featured some of the best players we have in today's game. Guys like Penei Sewell, Micah Parsons, Jamar Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown were all a part of the 2021 class, and this class even had 5 quarterbacks go in the top 15 picks. Now, whenever a class is being discussed leading up to the draft, you often hear that we'll really know how this draft will pan out in around 3 years, and we'll know who the true winners and losers from this class were. When you think of the winners from this draft class, you probably think of the Detroit Lions, and it makes sense, as they selected a first-team All-Pro tackle and a first-team All-Pro receiver from this draft, and gave them hefty contract extensions this offseason. Rightfully so, by the way. But when you think of the draft losers, it's not so obvious. You may think of the 49ers because of the selection of Trey Lance, and you would be right in a way, but they also drafted starters like Aaron Banks, Diamador Lenore, and Talanoa Hufanga, who was a first-team All-Pro in 2022. So who are the biggest losers? Well, we're going to break that down in today's video. Now let's begin. We are starting today's video with the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals had 7 selections in this draft with just 2 top 100 picks and 5 on day 3. They used their first round pick on linebacker Zaven Collins and their second round pick on receiver Rondale Moore, who is no longer on the roster. Of course, a draft class isn't defined by 2 picks, and we'll get to the rest of their selections in a minute, but Zaven's career path with the Cardinals has been unusual. He had a solid second season for the Cardinals as he had 100 tackles, 11 tackles for a loss, and even had a pick 6. But with Zaven's size at 6'4", 260, there's not always a place for him in today's game at linebacker, and I'm sure with his athleticism and his physical profile that some teams would like to bring him in as a free agent and try him out as an edge rusher when the time comes. And in 2023, after having a 100 tackle season in 2022, and after having a solid year, not elite, but a solid year, he was used in an entirely different role this past year, and anytime you have a guy as a tweener, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not ideal when this was your first round pick, and a guy who you hoped could be the face of your defense for years to come. Zaven's 5th-year option was declined, and he is now in the final year of his rookie contract. I would be pretty surprised if the Cardinals give him a contract beyond the 2024 season. That is assuming he doesn't have an insane career year and plays anything unlike we've seen from him through his first 50 career games, and I would expect him to go elsewhere next offseason. We've also seen GM Monty Ozenfort not be afraid to not pay guys Steve Keim either traded entirely too much for or drafted high, most notably Isaiah Simmons and now Chiefs receiver Marquise Brown. But the pick I was really disappointed in was the second round selection used on Rondale Moore. We are in an era where guys getting the football and scheming guys open is easier than ever before. Truly. You can design guys' touches in ways coaches wouldn't have even thought about 20 to 25 years ago, and in 3 years, Rondale amassed just 1,200 receiving yards and another 249 yards rushing. Meaning the Cardinals were trying to get him the football, but when they did, nothing was being made out of it, and they shipped him to Atlanta in exchange for quarterback Desmond Ridder. This isn't a scenario where there were better receivers on the board, or that they drafted a 6th round prospect in the top 50 or anything like that. This was just a flat-out miss. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the player he is today, was not who he was at the time of the 2021 draft for anyone wondering. I would argue missing on receivers in today's era is a bigger whiff than ever before because of everything GMs and coaches have at their disposal to be able to determine whether or not the receiver can be a guy in the NFL, and Rondale certainly hasn't been. Their next pick wasn't until near the end of round 4, and it was corner Marco Wilson, who was flat out released by the Cardinals in December of 2023 and is now a member of the Patriots. Marco had a few games where he showed flashes for the Cardinals, most notably a 2-interception game in 2022, but lifetime he has committed 16 penalties and has given up 17 touchdowns compared to 3 interceptions, and he was selected at the end of the 4th round for a reason. It wouldn't be fair to judge Marco on the same level as Zaven or even Rondale, but there's a reason this team has struggled over the past few years, and it was because of draft classes like this. They had 4 picks after pick 200, and those are true dart throws at that point, so we're not going to critique those picks when most of them don't work out as it is. Next up is the New York Jets, and this is not just because of the Zach Wilson selection. Obviously, Zach plays a big part in this, and ultimately why they traded for Aaron Rodgers heading into Wilson's third year, but there's a lot more that plays into this than just Zach Wilson. They had 3 picks in the top 34 selections, and they had an extra first-round pick from the Jamal Adams trade with the Seahawks. It was initially pick 23, which was used to trade up to pick 14, so they could go get USC offensive lineman Elijah Vera Tucker. The real unfortunate part about the Jets' 2021 draft class, aside from Zach Wilson of course, is Elijah has been a good offensive lineman when healthy, and the key there is when healthy, because he's only played in 28 of 51 possible games. I was very high on AVT coming out back in 2021, and hell, I still am high on AVT entering 2024, and I'm hopeful he can become an above average level starter. Their second round pick was used on receiver Elijah Moore from Ole Miss, and for those who may not know, Elijah is a Brown. He's never been a great receiver in the NFL, and I think it's safe to say through 3 years that he is at best a lower end number 2 receiver, and at worst a number 3 receiver that can make a few timely catches here and there. Elijah has just 1,600 career receiving yards, and had just 984 receiving yards with the Jets in 27 career games. I completely understand how easy it is to blame poor quarterback play for Elijah's struggles during his time at the Big Apple, but the Jets have had a 1,000-yard receiver in back-to-back years now in Garrett Wilson. I don't really blame the Jets or GM Joe Douglas for AVT not working out the way they hoped, because you can't control or have any sort of knowledge that he would have consecutive season-ending injuries by November, one being due to torn triceps and one being due to a torn Achilles. But spending 2 top 35 picks on a quarterback and receiver, and for them to both be off the roster before they enter year 4, is something else entirely. Elijah was traded to the Browns along with a 3rd round pick for a 2nd round pick, so it wasn't like the Jets got a whole lot in their return for him by any means. New York had a lot of day 3 picks, and I think the best was running back Michael Carter. Carter had a really good rookie year as he had over 950 yards from scrimmage, but that was by far his best year with the Jets. His average yards per carry would dip nearly a full yard between 2021 and 2022, and his yards per catch dipped a whole 2 yards between his rookie year and second year, as he went from 9 yards per catch to just 7 yards per catch. He had just 8 carries during the 2023 season for the Jets before being released in November. He was picked up the following day by the Arizona Cardinals and played 6 games for them to close out the 23 season. Now, New York also drafted a safety named Michael Carter who has played in 47 career games and has 20 career starts, and while that production is good from a guy who was drafted in the 5th round, and truly it is, it unfortunately does not make up for the rest of the class. I hope AVT can turn it around, but the 2 big strikeouts in Wilson and Elijah Moore were 2 big misses in the Joe Douglas era. To Nashville we go to discuss the Titans. The Titans draft started with first-round corner Caleb Farley, and to date, Farley has played in just 12 career games. He was touted as a high-risk, high-reward prospect, and with Tennessee being one of the teams featured in today's video, unfortunately you know how his career panned out. Caleb suffered a torn ACL in week 6 of his rookie year and a herniated disc in his second year, and through 2 years he played in just 12 games. He was placed on the physically unable to perform list prior to the 2023 season and did not play a snap during the 23 season. Caleb also had some personal things happen off the field that were very traumatic, and you can look them up if you'd like, and I am 100% rooting for the Caleb Farley comeback story. But ultimately, your draft is not defined by just a first-round pick. The Titans selected North Dakota State offensive tackle Dillon Radunz in the 2nd round, and Dillon played quite a bit during the 2023 season, in which he allowed more than 35 pressures and 5 sacks, but he did improve towards the end of the year. As of now, that pick is a toss-up, and if it works out, then the Titans did hit on the right tackle, and again, Dillon did improve towards the end of the 23 season, but 3 years in, this pick for a 2nd rounder was not the best. Now, could Dillon Radunz turn it around? Yes, but I would say that's far from a given. Their next pick was linebacker Monty Rice, and Monty played 2.5 seasons for the Titans before being released towards the end of the 2023 season, and is now a member of the New Orleans Saints. They also had a 4th top 100 pick, and that was defensive back Elijah Molden. Elijah has 2 career interceptions, both of which were pick sixes, and overall he's been a solid 3rd round pick, but again, it's a 3rd round corner, and he's not a franchise cornerstone by any means, so at best with the Titans 2021 draft, we're looking at maybe one starter in Dylan Radins, and that's a big maybe at that, and a contributor in Elijah Molden, and that's really about it from their 2021 draft class. The Titans had 4 draft picks on day 3, with 2 coming in the 4th round and 2 past the number 200 mark. We're not going to discuss the picks after 200 because those are true dart throws, but for the picks in the 4th round, the first was wide receiver Dez Fitzpatrick, who has 5 career receptions, and needless to say, 5 receptions for a 4th round pick is pretty disappointing. The other was pass rusher Rashad Weaver, who has 5.5 career sacks, all of which came in the 2022 season, and aside from the 22 season, Rashad has been a bit of a non-factor. We are of course rooting for the Caleb Farley comeback story, and the jury is still out on Dylan Radins, but as of now, this is a pretty disappointing draft class for the Titans. Now, from Tennessee to Washington we go to discuss the Commanders. The Commanders were technically the Washington football team at this point in time, but during this draft they had 10 picks overall, with 4 in the top 100, and more specifically 4 within the top 82. When you have 4 picks in the top 82, you're looking to walk out of the class with at least 2 good starters, and if you're lucky, 2 more key contributors, whether it be as a good special teams player or a specific role player like a 3rd receiver who comes in key moments, or whatever the case may be. But their top 4 picks were linebacker Jamin Davis, offensive lineman Sam Cosmi, defensive back Benjamin St-Juste, and wide receiver Dyami Brown. Jamin and Cosmi were 2 top 51 picks, and while Cosmi has been good at right guard, Jamin has been hit or miss for the football team / Commanders during his time as a pro. And recently it came out that Jamin will be given an opportunity to earn edge rusher snaps ahead of a contract year. If Jamin can get after the quarterback, great, but what we've seen from him so far has not been worth the 19th overall pick. To at least be somewhat fair to Jamin, there could be a lot worse 1st round picks than what Washington has with him on their roster, and I mean a lot worse. But this class stinks due in large part to the selections after him, and when you combine the positional value of Jamin at number 19 overall in a class that did not pan out, again aside from Cosmi, but the flashes from Jamin have been there as a pro, and what frustrates me with the Jamin pick is how he's been used since he's been drafted, and really it's more of a gripe with the previous coaching regime than it is with Jamin himself. I do think Dan Quinn will maximize what he can do this year, and the Commanders' linebacking core is a bright spot heading into the 24 season. But the draft after this was pretty forgettable, as their first of 2 third-round picks was corner Benjamin St-Juste, who has been about what you would expect a third-round corner to be when he plays, meaning there's occasional flashes, but lifetime he has an opposing passer rating of over 103 when targeted, and their other third-round pick was former North Carolina receiver Dyami Brown. Dyami has had quite the hype train over the years, and he was a lot of people's biggest sleeper at some point, but lifetime he had just 29 receptions for 476 yards, and I know third-round picks obviously aren't expected to be multiple-time 1,000-yard players, but this is extremely disappointing production from a top 85 pick, period. His career high in receptions for a season is 12, which he accomplished in his rookie year and this past year, and you get the point. I still believe Jamin can be a decent NFL player, and I do think Sam Cosmi will get a second contract from Washington, which is more than what can be said about some other draft classes. But a big reason the Commanders have struggled over the past few years, aside from Ron Rivera being their head coach, was not great production from their draft classes, and 2021 was no exception. They had 6 day 3 selections, and the best of this bunch was safety Derek Forrest, who lifetime has 124 career tackles and has started 16 career games. Now, Seattle had just 3 draft picks, as they spent their 1st and 3rd round selections on Jamal Adams, and they traded their 5th round pick for veteran guard Gabe Jackson. Having 3 picks is very rare, and it was only the 3rd time this century it had been done, so Seattle absolutely deserved a mention in today's video, as their 3 picks were used on receiver Dwayne Eskridge, corner Trey Brown, and offensive lineman Stone Forsythe. They could absolutely have an argument that their class was the worst in 2021, but I definitely wanted to at least mention them before we get out of here. But that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 35% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. Please check out the Football Analysis Podcast for more content. The link is in the description, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.